إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وأسوتنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحابته ومن تبعه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد أيها الإخوة، أوصيكم ولنفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل والسمع والطاعة. وقال تعالى في القرآن الحكيم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وقال تعالى: لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة من كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. All praise is due indeed for Allah. He alone is worthy of all praise. We praise Him, we seek His forgiveness, guidance and mercy, and we send peace and prayers on His final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who is our loved one, for whom we are willing to sacrifice not only ourselves but our parents and our children, who was sent as rahmatan lil alameen, al-mab'uth rahmatan lil alameen, as a mercy to the whole of creation, and as the best model and example for us to follow, as Allah mentioned in the Quran, uswatun hasanah. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and mercy of Allah be with you. Firstly, I think Brother Imran maybe got carried away with his generosity in the introduction, as most people who are introducing do. So I have to bring that generosity back to reality. I am not an expert in hadith. My teacher is an expert in hadith. I know what an expert in hadith is. Many claim they are muhaddith, but actually they're not muhaddith. Muhaddithin are few and far between. Expert in hadith are those who are nuqad, critics in hadith. They are definitely few and far between. In centuries they are few and far between. I don't have the expertise to even do naqd and criticism of hadith, but I refer that to the expert who is my teacher. I'm fortunate to have a teacher like that. Muhaddithin, or people of hadith who are experts in today's language, people generally mean they know a lot of hadith off by heart. Huffaz traditionally also didn't mean those who knew Quran off by heart. People who knew Quran off by heart traditionally in the early centuries of Islam were called Qurra, the reciters. Huffaz, like Al-Hafiz al-Iraqi, for example, was famous, and Huffaz are those who collected and knew lots of ahadith of Rasulullah off by heart. Anyhow, the topic is hijrah, al-hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the believers with him, historically. But I mentioned to Imran before as well, it's difficult to cover that topic, and perhaps we will only get near that topic without having a context to it. You've had 3 talks before on Meccan period, so I'm going to just check. Who came to the previous last talk, for example, from this audience? Hands, please. Okay, I'd like to see that. Don't be shy, you can put your hand up. Nothing Islamic about putting your hand up, by the way. And in the last one, which is supposed to build up to the hijrah, what I want to check, and I have an idea already because one or two attended, I asked, did we cover in the da'wah, I think we got to the phase of the Prophet ﷺ doing open da'wah to the Meccans, to the Quraysh. And so, followed on from that, did we cover persecution? No. You can't miss that out and jump to hijrah, because it makes no sense. And to realize what the Prophet and the Sahaba went through, if you want to even discuss even elementary or cursory look at the Meccan phase of the Prophet ﷺ, it is great injustice to just jump over that. So I can't talk to you about hijrah when you haven't done and considered, and yes, you can say, oh, I know about the persecutions. I think there'll be things that, there are lessons from that we need to learn. Sure. And beyond the persecution, of course, there is a first migration. Did we cover that? Migration to Ethiopia, Abyssinia?
Yeah.
In the last talk?
Yeah.
Briefly. That's very important. Actually, there were 2 migrations to Ethiopia, not 1. There were 2. And then beyond that came, it's called social boycott. But I want you to go away today and realize, actually, this is a wrong term. It was not a social boycott. It was much more than that. It was a siege.
That's right. Yeah.
Social boycotts used in all the translation historical books on Sirah. It is inappropriate as a term. Social boycott, we'll come back to that later. And then was Ta'if. You can't miss Ta'if out. And what happened as a consequence of that. So I have to mention some of these things before we actually move to the hijrah and whatever we manage to mention of the hijrah. Prophet ﷺ was very soon after the open dawah Rasulullah ﷺ started with فَانْذِرْ عَشِيرَتُكَ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. So warn your tribe and your family. After 2 or 3 years, people like to call it a private stage. I don't think there was any statement from the Prophet ﷺ, now we're doing the private stage. It just happened that the first few years of the Prophet ﷺ, near and dear ones, of course, you begin with those who you know. So it was the near family and friends, and things were getting out, but the openness as it started, the Prophet ﷺ, فَاسْدَى بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ. Announce what you've been ordered. Oh, قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمُدَثِّرْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمُزَمِّلْ قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ. Arise and warn. All these are ayat to do with the beginning of the open phase. It didn't take long after the open phase, maybe less than a year, before the mushrikun, the idolaters, couldn't stand it. Because people with open face from shirk started coming to believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in La ilaha illa Muhammad Rasulullah. And that was not going to be tolerated. So within the 4th year of Nubuwwah, the phase of persecution started. And the persecution, Sirah mentions glimpses of persecution. Don't ever think when you read the Sirah book, brothers and sisters, that you know all about the persecution because you read about Bilal, radiallahu anhu, who was laid on hot sun and had stone put on one day. And he said, Ahad on that one day. It didn't happen for one day. That's the image you can get because it's just a capturing a little picture. Don't think that he was the only one who was punished and persecuted, and don't think it happened for one day. It kept on happening for long periods of time. Don't think it was only Khabbab ibn al-Arat, radiallahu anhu, who was laid down on burning coal. And this happened again, not just one day, so much so that his back became scarred for life. And it is mentioned later on when Umar ibn Khattab saw much later on his back when he asked him to expose it, how it was scarred. He was in tears and remembering the times of what he went through. And don't think it was just him. Don't think it was just Lubayna who was being beaten up by Umar before he became a believer, day in, day out. Don't think it was just the family of Yasir, Ammar ibn Yasir, who in this time, the 4th year of Nubuwwah, they were the ones who Ammar and his family, his mother and father, because they were from a lowly tribe, they were from a slave family who had been freed. But sometimes you also get image in Sirah that it was just the slave families and lowly ones who were being persecuted. The likes of Ammar ibn Yasir, Khabbab ibn Arat, not Quraysh, and Bilal, who became a freed slave. And it's not true. Other Sahaba? Nay, of course, the Prophet ﷺ himself. And don't think it was one or two incidents with the Prophet ﷺ. It was not. It was a constant thing that was ongoing day in and day out. Okay. The family of Yasir, and we know, which is relevant and important, that the first person who was martyred declaring La ilaha illallah at the hands of Abu Jahl was who?
His mother.
Sumayya, his mother, yes, the wife of Yasir. And after her, Yasir, the husband as well. They were the ones who were first martyred in the name of La ilaha, because they wouldn't deter, they wouldn't denounce. So they were killed. They were killed. And Ammar was at the same time having to watch his parents being butchered, was also being punished and beaten to a pulp until he actually denounced La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. He denounced. And that's why the ruling comes from this story when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions those who do kufr, and it mentions illa man ukriha, except for the one who has been compelled and forced into denying. And in their heart is their itminan, they still have the belief because it can't be taken out. So ayah came specifically at that time in the Quran to deal with that issue, because he felt guilty afterwards, because he was released when he denounced belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He felt very shamed and guilty and came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling him what he did. And the ayah came in the Quran to release him, to relieve him of that burden of guilt. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, إِذَا يَعِدْ فَعِدْ, if they do the same to you again, you do the same again. You do the same again. To safeguard life, when it is allowed, it is mubah. Therefore the ulama said to denounce, because you still have it in your heart and they can't take that away from you in that duress situation. They said it's allowed, but it sometimes can be better even not to in this situation. And of course, with all persecution and killing, the Prophet ﷺ was not exempt from that. Neither was Abu Bakr, because they were a Qurayshi tribe. Yeah. The Prophet ﷺ had pebbles and stones thrown at him, hit by stones, strangled by a sheet by Uqba ibn Mu'ayt from the evildoers. He did quite a bit of that kind of thing, being stirred up by the likes of Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl, of course, his name is a nickname. He didn't call himself Abu Jahl. We know that, of course, don't we? He didn't say, my name is Abu Jahl, father of ignorance. Actually, he was known amongst the Quraysh as what? Abu al-Hakam, the father of wisdom. The believers called him Abu Jahl because of his enmity and hatred. But this is an important issue here I want you to think about. Abu Jahl's ignorance was being steeped in tradition and denial and kufr. But he wasn't a fool. Otherwise he wouldn't have been called Abu al-Hakam. Very important to understand it. He wasn't a fool, you know. Why wasn't he a fool? The Prophet ﷺ prayed, made a special dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support Islam by Amrayn, the two Umars. He was called Amr and the other one was Umar. So in Arabic language they put them both together and say Amrayn. Either of the two Umars. So the Prophet ﷺ was actually praying to Allah to strengthen Islam from Abu Jahl or Umar bin Khattab, which shows you that both of them were caliber. Both were of caliber people. Don't think that he just, nothing. He was, because the Prophet ﷺ knew either of these would strengthen Islam. As it happened to be Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, who must have taken the step and Allah opened his heart to believe. Here it's an important issue here as well for us to understand a lesson from this. The Prophet ﷺ also said in another authentic hadith, he says, الناس معادن كمعادن الفضة والذهب خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. The Prophet ﷺ said, human beings are like precious metal. Human beings are like precious metal. They're like gold and silver. The best of those in Jahiliyyah, in ignorance, are the best of those in Islam. The best of those in ignorance, meaning in kufr as well, will be the best of those in Islam if they but understand. Notice the Prophet ﷺ didn't say if they just know. Not only just because they say La ilaha illa Muhammad Rasulullah by the tongue, but he said إِذَا فَقِهُ, if they understand. And that you find as well from people who embrace Islam, converts. They often have a lot more to give, a lot more energy, and if they have the understanding, that leaves many Muslims just Muslims by name. Often we feel, oh well, we never understood these things, and we're just Muslim, born in Muslim families, and just plodding along, because we're just plodders. English language. We're just plodders. We're not going to do much anyway, because خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام. The best of those then will be, because there are abilities of leadership, abilities of conviction, abilities of strength of character. It can be used for wrong and it can be used for right. It is not the sword that is the problem. The sword is the strength. It depends on who wields the sword. Yes? Who wields the sword? An ill tyrant, evil person, or a good person? The sword's not the problem. The sword's not the problem. So, and this is a lesson for us as well, about understanding in the same hadith, how important it is that strength comes with understanding our deen. Strength in character, strength in behavior, and strength in da'wah to others. Depends on how much we absorbed and understood the beauty of this wonderful being. So as it happens, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, he embraced Islam. This was in the 5th year of hijrah, shortly before the first migration took place. Yes, it strengthened Islam. The story of Umar ibn Khattab embracing Islam, majority of people know. There's no authenticity to it. I'm afraid to burst your bubble. If you want to go to hadith and apply the rules of hadith to the story of Umar ibn Khattab and how he embraced Islam and the details of his sister getting hurt and bleeding, and then he's reading the Quran, none of that is based on authentic hadith. We don't know how it happened, actually, reality is, but it's in Sirah. Hamza was, of course, the uncle of Rasulullah, but he was of similar age to Rasulullah. He was also a foster brother to Rasulullah. He'd been suckled by the same suckleness, Thuwayba, as the Prophet had been. So foster brother and uncle, but of similar age. And of course the stories are there. I haven't got time to go into the story, otherwise we won't get anywhere else. Of course the story of Sirah is impossible to cover in 4 sessions. You know, some of you, that I have 24 CDs on the life of the Prophet and lessons from it. That's 24, 25 hours or so of it. Yeah, that was done in detail. And that's recorded and available. But this is cursory what we're trying to cover, because the vast majority of it is there. Anyhow, persecutions continued. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned Uqba ibn Mu'ayth doing what he did. Every day he was getting heckled. One of the times was also, some stories in Sirah mention the Prophet ﷺ was abused by Abu Jahl. Others mention he was hit by him as well. But the Prophet ﷺ bore all this and the Sahaba with sabr and patience. This is very important to understand as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the believers, Kuffu aydiyakum wa aqimus salah. hold down your hands, kuffu aydiyakum, and establish salah. Wasta'inu bis-sabri was-salah. Sabr, that is the sabr, and salah will help you maintain that sabr and build you in iman and taqwa. That was the order. That was the order. And the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, that's what they were following. Some actually say that this is to do with because they were weak at the time. As soon as they gained in strength, then the order came to go and fight and have war. I think that's also a misunderstanding. It hasn't come from Quran or Sunnah. When the Prophet ﷺ, and that goes into the story of Medina, was given permission to fight, with the Sahaba to fight, it was to fight back. It was to defend. It was to defend. It was to defend a city. It was to defend a state. Whereas when they were in Mecca, the way to defend was not to fight back, but to hold on and bear patiently, because that was the character that was affecting others who were watching. The character of sabr brought more people to this deen, because others with fair mind, open mind, could see what have they done wrong, how they've been treated. As Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, when Prophet ﷺ on the occasion was being dragged and strangulated with this sheet, he removed it and said, what? Leave him alone. What? You will strangle a man and kill him because he says there is no God but Allah? Reasoning with people and enduring the injustice and dhulm that was being thrown on them. And it's important to understand the kufu aydiyakum wa aqimus salah. In that is lessons for us. Nevertheless, despite that, some Sahaba took permission from the Prophet ﷺ, asked first about migration, hijrah, the first hijrah. And it was mentioned to Rasulullah ﷺ about hijrah to the kingdom of Ethiopia, or Abyssinia was known at that time, to whose king, Najashi. Najashi means king. Some say in Sirah, I don't know how authentic it is, his name was Hassam or Hasham. But Najashi that's not his name. Negus means king. King of Ethiopia, in case you didn't know. The Prophet ﷺ said something very interesting when he was asked, and he encouraged those Sahaba who wanted to migrate to go there. He said, La yuzlamu nafsu, or La yuzlamu ahadun. In that Najashi. No one will be wronged under Najashi's ruling. This is interesting, because Najashi wasn't a believer, he was a Christian king. So can you have justice under Christianity or kufr? Our young brothers running around from Hizb ut-Tahrir years ago said, no, this is kufr, you can't cooperate with, they didn't even want to cooperate with disbelievers. And vast majority of them actually had read nothing in the Sirah, nothing really in depth from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here he is, giving permission to Sahaba to go to a Christian kingdom to find justice. Isn't that what many people have done from Muslim countries in the last 150 years as well? We've come here, have we not? Some of us came, yes, many of us, for economic reasons. But I tell you, of course, you know stories of those who came from, whether it's Palestine, Syria, Egypt, etc. Not presently, but even in the past, to avoid what? Persecution at the hands of who? Muslims. The history repeating itself. History repeating itself. So can you find justice? That's why I say when people talk about, oh, these Muslims, they want to bring Sharia here. So in one or two talks I said, actually Sharia is already here. Because you know what Sharia is? It is justice. Justice. Relatively here. And Ibn al-Qayyim says something beautiful when he's talking about Sharia. It's a long statement, bits of it I remember. He said, Sharia is mercy. Sharia is justice. Sharia is all that brings benefit to humanity. Not just Muslims, he said. To humanity in this world and the hereafter. And he said, wherever Sharia came, and what did he mean by Sharia? He meant the revelation Didn't mean the opinions of the fuqaha. He meant what Allah sent, the principles and values, and what Rasulullah, the final messenger, is corroborated in his authentic traditions and sunnah. That's what he meant by Sharia. And Sharia he also meant what also was sent to all other Anbiya before. Because he said whatever harm and evil comes to human beings is not from the Sharia. It's because people went away from the Sharia. He said, and whatever good is present even in disbelieving societies, even before Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came and even after, whatever remains in non-Muslim societies of good and benefit came from the Sharia originally. Came from revelation originally. It's what its remnants are still. So Sharia, if we mean by justice and the right to learn knowledge, etc., to have a house, to earn, etc., not to be persecuted, to have freedom in that sense, well, then we can start applying those things anywhere, if we really understand Sharia in a broad sense. So here we have the migration. First, only a handful, perhaps 11, some see that the accounts mention 12 going to Ethiopia. And then happens an incident which is mentioned in Sirah. Actually, no, Sirah, traditionally, I don't know whether you got this in the first talk, was known as Maghazi. It was never known as Sirah. All the early Sirah writings before Sirah of Ibn Hisham, which was based on Sirah of Ibn Ishaq, more abbreviated version, authenticated, most of Sirah and about the life of Rasulullah, his biography is based on this source, Ibn Ishaq. Some from Ibn Sa'ad, his Tabaqat, others taken from a little bit from Tariq al-Kabir. There's very little in authentic hadith. Whether you take Bukhari, Muslim and all the others, very little. If you took all the authentic hadith to do with the life of Rasulullah, it would be a very small book. It wouldn't be a big thick book of Ibn Hisham, Ibn Ishaq. It was called Maghazi originally, for the first couple of centuries, of Hijri centuries. What does Maghazi mean? It dealt mainly with conquests and battles. That's what they focused on. Just like traditionally before Nabuwwah of Rasulullah, Arabs used to write about their ancestry and they used to write about battles. That was what was important. Valor, battle. This took place, Badr and Uhud and Khandaq. That's what they focused on. The rest was just built on and added on later on. A lot of it on hearsay. A lot of it on hearsay. Some corroborated by hadith, etc. And that's why you have things that you have to be careful about quoting, and we allow them in Sirah as long as we don't take any hukam and ruling from it. That's why ulama and fuqaha didn't take rulings from Sirah. They went to authentic hadith if they want to make a hukam or a ruling, because Sirah cannot be relied upon. It gives you an overall view, but in the details one has to be careful. That's the nature of Sirah. So 11 or 12 went. What happened, mentioned in Sirah, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah An-Najm, وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the whole of this surah, open publicly. This is around the 5th year of Nubuwwah. And when he recited it, everybody's gathered. All those who were gathered, at the end of the surah it says, فَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ وَاعْبُدُوا. So prostrate to Allah alone and worship Him. Everybody fell prostrate in sujood. They were mesmerized, overawed by Surah Najm. And I often say to audiences that they were more mesmerized and overawed than you and I are, because majority of us, if we listen to Surah Najm, it will just go straight over our heads. We won't even understand what it's saying. Isn't that sad? But the Kuffar Quraysh understood what it was saying, because their language is Arabic. And they were overawed by it. They couldn't stop themselves falling prostrate to the message of the Prophet, as Prophet ﷺ fell prostrate as well. It's said that Umayyah ibn Khalf was one of the evildoers, Umayyah, the owner of Bilal. He's the only one who was there who didn't do it. He just took a bit of dirt and rubbed it on his head, because he was so arrogant. But when this prostration took place, it says, now, this prostration of everybody gathering, taking place, is in Sahih Hadith. That did happen. It is reported authentically. Then some reports mention that this news got to some of the people in Ethiopia, Abyssinia, and a handful came back thinking that everybody's embraced Islam in Mecca, that we don't need to stay there. When they came back, they found the contrary. That was just a momentary lapse. Momentary lapse. And now what happened was a second migration when between 70 and 80 Sahaba went to the migration of Abyssinia, and including Uthman ibn Affan and Ruqayya, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They went from lowly clans. Some people have this idea also that the emigration or migration to Abyssinia was all those who were slaves and lowly class because they were being beaten up and they were escaping because they couldn't tolerate it. Actually, you find strong people there from big tribes as well. I just mentioned Uthman ibn Affan, for example, and many others I haven't got time to go into, including Ja'far ibn Abi Talib from the tribe of Hashim Abdul Muttalib. Yeah? The cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And about Ja'far, we know the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the most close in appearance to me, in looks, is my cousin Ja'far in appearance to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was blessed with his looks being the closest to that of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam from his family. And the story in Abyssinia, of course, majority of people know about what the Quraysh did. They sent the likes of Amr ibn al-As, who was a diplomat even then, became governor of, you see, khiyaruhum fil jahiliyyah, khiyaruhum fil Islam. Here's another example. Amr ibn al-As, who's known later on in history as the governor of Egypt, the conqueror of Egypt, Amr ibn al-As. But his cleverness was used for good then. But his cleverness is here. Also, he was picked and he knew the courtiers. Ibn al-Rabi'a went with him, and he knew Najashi as well, the king. So they tried to bribe the courtiers, etc. Some things never change. Same history repeating itself. Bribe the courtiers beforehand, give lots of gifts and things to Najashi, and then ask for what they want to ask. To send these people back. These are heathens who escaped, they've been bad in Mecca, etc., etc. But Najashi said that, and here comes why the Prophet ﷺ said, La yuzlamu ahad. No one is wronged under Najashi. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he knew what I was talking about. Because now what does Najashi do? He says, no, I can't let them just go like that. I have to give them a fair hearing. I want to hear what they have to say. There's the opportunity for justice now. So now, Sahaba became, of course, worried, and they selected and chose Ja'far to be the spokesperson. In here is also wisdom and lessons, which proved to be right. First, because this is da'wah now, he has to stand and present the message of Islam to Najashi and the courtiers. This is da'wah. What are you going to present? So, as I said in talks before, so they chose the one who was most handsome. He's nearest looking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They chose somebody who was most handsome amongst them. And as I said, they didn't send somebody with a hook and a patch on one eye and said, you go and do da'wah. It won't be very, very attractive, the da'wah. Especially when the views are different with the hook and the eye on top of that, of course, that don't really represent the beauty of this thing. So they chose somebody with that. They chose somebody with eloquence and wisdom as well, who's able to present the message in a way which touches the hearts of people as it touched the heart of Najashi and some others. And there is a famous speech, I haven't got time to go into, but you should study it and read it, what beautiful things he said, what we were like. And then a man came who we trust his nobility, known as Al-Amin by everybody. What did he call us to? He's telling them, he said, don't worship stone idols, worship only one God. Be truthful, look after your neighbors. Don't break up off blood ties. Don't eat dead. establish prayer, give charity to others. What is he teaching? They're telling him this is what we're about. Subhanallah. Which actually caused tears to come from the eyes of Najashi. And he said, no, I will not send them back. They tried again the next day and said, oh, ask them. They called Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, who you believe in as Christians, they say he's a slave of God. To try and stir it up again. But anyway, the story carried on, as I mentioned, about the truth about Isa alayhi salam being a slave of God, but being his great messenger, and the spirit and the word that Allah SWT blew into Maryam alayhi salam. Anyway, so they stayed there. Actually, this migration, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is the cousin. It isn't as though the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina took place and Ja'far came back straight away. Did he? So if he didn't, many others didn't. The hijrah obligation from Mecca to Medina was on the Meccan Muslims, not on the ones in Abyssinia. He actually came back in 7 years later. 7th year of the Prophet ﷺ's life in Medina. That late. Interesting lessons there. And how they stayed there, and what da'wah they did there. They weren't going around fighting and killing. But their character and their da'wah there. That itself is a story on its own. I haven't got time to go into it. Again, it's trying to give some glimpses. Of course, now Amr ibn al-As comes back. Of course, the Quraysh are absolutely up in arms. They tried to persecute her, and some 70 odd escaped over there now. They can't stand that. They're seething. Persecution gets even worse for those who are remaining, including Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So they decide, of course, we know about the delegations. There wasn't one delegation sent to Abu Talib, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Many times they came. Yeah. And we know what the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm sure you've heard that in previous sessions, about having the sun and the moon put in his right and left hand, and he will still not give up in preaching this message. So the persecutions continued, the delegations kept coming back. They decided now that to threaten the tribe, because the way the culture at the time was, tribes gave the protectorate to their family members. They couldn't kill one, the fear of tribal warfare. And they didn't want to do that. It would mean bigger bloodshed. But they wanted Abu Talib and others, because he was being protected by the Banu Hashim and Banu Abdul Muttalib, to hand over for killing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They wanted to get rid of him, and they wouldn't. So they decided now to do what is called in the historic books as described as social boycott. Actually, it wasn't. It was a siege. And who was sieged? Many Muslims don't realize that. They think that it was the Sahaba and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who was put in the siege. It wasn't. It was a tribe of Banu Hashim and Abdul Muttalib, believers and disbelievers, who were put under siege in She'b Abi Talib, which was a valley just outside Mecca. They were confined. It wasn't just social boycott, oh, we're not going to talk to you. Big deal. What's that going to do? Social boycott wouldn't lead to people starving and the crying of babies in the middle of the night of starvation. And the Prophet starts describing those 3 years of siege, years 6, 7, and 8, as the worst years of his life. He wouldn't describe a social boycott like that, would he? No. Also, it doesn't mean they starved for 3 years, they would have been dead. Bits of food got in, but there were many times they were boiling leaves of plants, or even leather slippers in boiled water to drink the soup from that. The time when they used to tie a stone. What for? To reduce hunger pains. When you get pain in your stomach from hunger, what do? You press it like that to try and ease it. This is also to understand what stone means while they was tying the stone. And the Prophet ﷺ had 2 stones tied to his, showing longer periods of starvation. Not that he needed more stones for his hunger. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the cries of babies. So, the disbelievers from the tribes were also suffering with the Muslims. And continued to There's nothing documented about disbelievers of Banu Hashim and Abdul Muttalib saying, oh no, hand him over, we've had enough of this. So there was support, not only from Uncle Abu Talib, but also from these people as well. Following the old system, they weren't willing to hand him over. And that's why it continued. And you know, the other interesting thing many Muslims don't realize, and hence in their ignorance go around saying, oh, we don't need to cooperate with kuffar, we don't need non-Muslims, we don't need their help, we used to have some young people going around in this country coming out against us because we were on the same stage as non-Muslims, standing for a common cause. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after talking about disbelievers, nay, enemies, said, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, cooperate in all that which is good and righteous and God consciousness, cooperate in things. And we have this cooperation here, saying, oh, it's haram, this is kufr, if you do this, this is kufr. Rubbish that people have come out with in their ignorance of understanding this deen. And you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. You know who ended this boycott, this siege? Was it Abu Bakr and Umar? Radiallahu anhuma? Was it Hamza? Hamza would have been under siege anyway, because he's part of Banu Hashim and Abdul Muttalib. Abu Lahab was excluded from that because he was one of the evildoers, and he stayed in Makkah. He was one of the evildoers with Jamil. Both of them mentioned Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab. Abi Lahab wa tab. It wasn't Abu Bakr and wasn't Umar. It wasn't the other Sahaba that ended the siege. They had no power. It was 5 or 6 mushrikun, non-Muslims, the likes of Abu al-Bakhtari, Hisham, Zam'a ibn al-Aswad, and Mut'im ibn Adi. Because one came to the other and said, how can we sleep the nights after 3 years of hearing our own tribe they're human beings, crying of babies in the night, starving while we sleep in our comfort beds. By God, I'm not going to. By God, because they believed in God still. I'm not going to continue. So one said to the other, we can't do it on our own. I, as an individual, can't stand against Abu Jahl and the council, which were the government, the ruling council of the mushrikun. The likes of Walid ibn Mughira, Abu Sufyan, Abu Jahl, Umayyah bin Khalf, these kind of, Ubay bin Khalf, Nadr ibn al-Harith, these were the most evil and wretched, Abu Lahab, evil and most wretched of people, and also authority and power as well. Utbah ibn Rabi was not like them, although he was also in the same council. Utbah being the father of Hind. So it was these 4 or 5 who plotted a plan to take on the council to end this, because they thought it was they didn't become believers, they just thought it was inhuman. And they plotted a plan how to go about in a public audience, because the agreement from the council to keep the siege on was written on a parchment and put on the door of the Kaaba. And they plotted a plan to challenge Abu Jahl, and then one helped the other. It was like having support in the parliament. Yeah? Rather than one person speaking, there was support by 4 or 5, 6 of them speaking one after the other, supporting the same idea. And Abu Jahl was the main one they were trying to denounce, because he was the most ardent one. The rest were less so. So they had to defeat him. Yeah. And in that argument and debate that took place, they defeated him and they destroyed this parchment, and the siege was lifted. And the Prophet ﷺ never forgot Abu al-Bakhtari or the likes of Mut'im ibn Adi in future times. In future times. So much so that even in the battle that took place of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ informed the Sahaba to Abu al-Bakhtari to not fight with him. So you find actually in some Sirah topics in the battle that Abu Bakr is there and Sahaba are going in the opposite direction. They don't want to fight with him. Because he told them not to fight with him, not to kill him, because of what he did at this time. Prophet always remembered that favour and justice that they stood for, even though they didn't embrace Islam. Even though they didn't embrace Islam. And so the siege was lifted because of the efforts of these non-Muslims. And here is again the essence of the character of Rasulullah and Sahaba having an effect on others. Not an abhorrent image, but an image of patience, sabr and mercy. And character itself then glows and affects the hearts of others, does it not? And this is the foundation of that da'wah. It's when you're under difficulty and trial and endurance and your character really blooms what you're really made of. And for sure, because human beings are created on fitrah, it affects those who open their hearts and their minds. Of course, there's lessons in that for us as well. And Prophet ﷺ didn't say to these five, off with you, kuffar, I don't need your help. Allah will help me. He could have said that. And many of our people behave like that nowadays. He didn't say that. He respected the culture and the parliament and the ways of working of that time. As he respected the culture, part of that was giving protection. If you didn't get it with your family, you could take the protectorate of anybody. And somebody else wouldn't come and touch you or harm you, even if they wanted to kill you. So the Prophet ﷺ respects all that. He didn't come and just turn everything upside down. And that's why I mentioned before as well, when the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُئِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Surely I have been raised to perfect makarim, the goodness in character. Perfect means makarim al-akhlaq already exist in the society. They were already there. Good character and good things were already there. Perfect them means to take it to a different level, to make it even better. He didn't say, I have come to introduce makarim al-akhlaq. He said, I have come to perfect makarim al-akhlaq. And this is good character, what these people did in getting rid of the siege. It was good character that somebody, the likes of Zayd, who was the father of Sayyid ibn Zayd was married to Fatima, not the daughter of Rasulullah, so was married to Fatima, the daughter of Umar bin Khattab. His father died before the Nubuwwah of Rasulullah, but he was known as one of the Ahnaf, the upright ones who believed in one God and not in shirk. And he used to look after orphan girls. That was good character. Good character. You'll have covered things like Hilful Fadul, the pact of chivalry at the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an, who never became a believer. Again, he died before the Nubuwwah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the pact of chivalry, about which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said after the Nubuwwah, much later he said, had I been called to such a pact again, now in Islam, I would have been party to it. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's very important for us to understand these kind of points. So the siege ends. Shortly after the siege, some historians say perhaps the effects of the siege and the trials and difficulty of 3 years of that, Abu Talib dies. Abu Talib died. And on his deathbed, this is mentioned in many authentic hadiths, by the way. Abu Talib, on his deathbed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam visited him and tried to encourage him to say La ilaha illa Muhammad Rasulullah. We also know from authentic hadith that Abu Talib respected and marveled at this message that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his nephew, brought. But some of the tribal leaders from the Mushrikun were also there, like Abu Jahl and others. And when the Prophet ﷺ encouraged him to say that, they kept saying, Ala millati Abdul Muttalib. You're not going to disown Abdul Muttalib, who happened to be actually the grandfather of Rasulullah ﷺ. He said to Abu Talib. So Abu Talib actually said in one, in case they think I'm afraid of death, that I'm denouncing the religion of old fathers, I can't do that. So he said, Ala millati Abdul Muttalib. He stayed on the the shirk way. And the Prophet ﷺ was upset, of course. And he walked away and he said, I will ask forgiveness for you as long as I'm not prevented from doing so. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. As it happened later on, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them. وَمَا كَانَ لِلنَّبِيِّ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنْ يَسْتَغْفِرُوا لِلْمُشْرِكِينَ وَلَوْ كَانَ أُولِي قُرْبَى. And it is not right for the Prophet and the believers to ask forgiveness for idolaters, even if they are of near and dear family. And another ayah, the Prophet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that you can't guide the ones that you love. It's because the guidance isn't in Prophet's hands. Guidance is in Allah's hands. Allah only knows whether they want the guidance or whether they don't want the guidance. لَن تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. I think that's the ayah. So, some people got carried away in their writings, like Imam Suyuti, for example, and some Sufi writers in the past as well. Even Shibli Nomani in his Siratul Nabi doesn't accept a hadith from Bukhari and others, which is a strong hadith, to say that Abu Talib did not embrace Islam. He died a mushrik. They became emotional and said, oh, he was the uncle of Rasulullah, so how could he just die a disbeliever? So Imam Suyuti writes, based on fabricated reports, saying that he embraced Islam. Where there are authentic reports, not coming just from, including coming from Ali radiallahu anhu, from Abbas and other Sahaba, making it absolutely clear, even Ibn Ishaq, that he died a mushrik. He died a mushrik. And in fact, in similar authentic reports, Abbas actually says, remember, it's his brother, Abu Talib, uncle of Rasulullah. So he says, so what benefit was it? And he's not embraced Islam yet. Abbas didn't embrace Islam till much later, just before Fatu Makkah. But he still supported Rasulullah. He was not like Abu Lahab. So Abbas is there as well. He died a mushrik. So Abbas says to Rasulullah, even Abbas is a disbeliever, he's saying, so what benefit was it? What benefit did you give him? And he fought for you, he defended you, he got angry for you. The Prophet ﷺ said, the benefit is that he will be in a fire which is only coming up to his ankles. The highest parts of the fire. Had it not been for me, he would have been in the lowest depths of the fire, like the rest of the mushrikeen. And another one report, it mentions that he'll be given to wear shoes of metal, and the fire will, underneath, they will be heated so that his brain boils. Hellfire is never a pleasant place. You don't get a little garden in darkness in hellfire. You always get fire in hellfire. If that's the least of the punishments of hellfire, God help us. So that's to do Abu Talib. Khadija radiallahu anha, wife of Rasulullah also passed away within those few months. The Prophet called this year, some seerah writers say it's the 9th year of Nubuwwah, others say it's the 10th year of Nubuwwah. There's always this debate because dates were never that accurate. And the Prophet called this Am al-Huzn, the year of sadness, because he lost his support and he lost his protection as well. And about Khadija radiallahu anha, the Prophet had some amazing things to say. In a culture of the time when women were looked down upon, you see what the Prophet did. That's why Umar bin Khattab used to say in Medina, he said, you would never answer us. We were over you like that in Mecca until he came. Who did he mean? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and what he brought. Since then, since he's come, you answer us back. But actually, it's interesting that even in Jahili times, it was in Mecca that was men over the women like that, according to Umar and the Muhajirun. When they went to Medina, they said, in Medina, the women are over the men like that. Women were more dominant. They were different, the women in Medina, culturally, even at that time, to the women in Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ did turn up in Medina and trounce the women in Medina and say, oh, this is terrible, you need to be like the women in Mecca. There was cultural difference. And the Muhajirin said, our women are learning from the women in Medina. So they had to change and adjust as well with the culture of Medina. Very interesting things which I mentioned. Will I ever get to the hijrah? I feel really guilty not getting to it, but you know, and this after death, you see now the Prophet has lost protection. This is a reason why now Prophet is in danger of being killed. So what does he have to do? He has to look elsewhere. Now the thing starts of the Prophet approaching now more fervently other tribes. Remember, also the Prophet doesn't do that from himself. Doesn't do it from himself. He's under wahi. So the Prophet first place he approaches is Taif. 9th or 10th year of Nubuwwah. And Prophet visits Taif because Taif and Mecca have two main towns, settlements. They have a competition with each other as well. The leadership. Taif always trying to compete with Mecca actually. That's because they have an inferiority complex, Taif. Because they know the Kaaba's there. Right? So they're always trying to compete with the Qurayshis and Mecca. And also they have interrelation and ties of blood ties, intermarried families. And some of the Quraysh who were rich from Mecca had their summer homes in Taif because it was cooler. They would retire to go there, like Oldham, for example. So there was a connection already, a natural connection. So the Prophet thought, well, Quraysh have ties with Banu Thaqif. Banu Thaqif are the people of Taif. So of course you start there. Perhaps there'll be more recipient. But actually, the leadership of Taif, as you know, there were three brothers, Abdul Jalil and Masood and one other. They were disgusting. Disgusting. This is Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah. And we even talk about and read about the persecution of Rasulullah Uqbah ibn Mu'ayth throwing the entrails of a camel on his back. Somebody hitting him, somebody throwing stones at him. This is sallallahu alayhi wasallam who water off his arms and his mouth used to come from wudu, and Sahaba used to try and catch it to put it on themselves because they knew if they touched him, if the liquid came off and mixed with theirs, fire cannot touch them. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Yeah, Sahaba trying to take the metal clip from a helmet out of his mouth. So their teeth either bled and the blood from the Prophet mixed with theirs. Because they know if that happened, the fire cannot touch them. So what if you do the opposite to that messenger? The Prophet ﷺ said, in an authentic hadith, said, had I taken a Khalil for myself, people say a friend, Khalil. Actually, Khalil is much more than that. Khalil is not a friend. Khalil is more than a loved one. The best word I could find in English, we were just discussing this a few weeks ago with my teacher. The best word I could find is the dearest, the dear one. He said, had I taken a dear one or Khalil, I would have taken Abu Bakr as my Khalil. But Allah has already taken two Khalils for himself. One, Ibrahim, we all know. But second, Allah has taken me as a Khalil. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if he's a Khalil of Allah, you try and harm him, insult him, injure him, how could you? Sallallahu. And where are you going to go? And the abuse and what was meted out to him, Taif. And the urchins, old and young, who pelted him with stones, was bleeding from head to toe. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He stayed a few days there. It's not a one-day trip. He stayed for, some Sira writers say, a couple of weeks there. But that was the end of it. I was pelted and sent out in a wretched fashion. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And again, what I want to mention here again, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and you understand why, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we have not sent you down, sent you except as a mercy to the whole of creation. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He indeed was. We witness to that. He indeed was, even though we've never met him. We are witness to that. Are we not, brothers and sisters?
Yes.
We love him from the core of our hearts, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that's why if you want to know sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, part of it is reading a hadith, but it's reading seerah. That's why, and I found this out, I read seerah so many books and so many times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the ability and time. Praise be to Allah. Nothing to do with me. I was fortunate. And I remember being ill many years ago and in bed, couldn't go to work. So I picked up my Martin Ling's Muhammad Rasulullah, which is basically Ibn Hisham. I remember reading it then. And every time I read that book, at that time I was reading it, the love for Rasulullah was increasing more and more. That's why I advise people to do that. And I found out later, it was interesting, that's why Qadi Ayad, the great scholar from Maghrib Andalus, he wrote the book and he called his book on the life of the Prophet ﷺ As-Shifa. As-Shifa means the cure. And people in his time who were ill in bed, they used to read that book, make them feel better. As-Shifa. In his book, As-Shifa, he doesn't actually cover the story of Rasulullah ﷺ. If you read the book, you see that he deals with akhlaq, the character, his appearance, and some of the key things he brings out. How he's supposed to be with Rasulullah ﷺ. What if somebody insults Rasulullah ﷺ? What about sending salam on Rasulullah ﷺ? What was his appearance? So he doesn't do a seerah like Seerah Ibn Hisham or Ibn Ishaq. It's not like that. It is. It's a big thick book. Despite that, it's a big thick book. So, coming back to loving Rasulullah ﷺ and his character and his mercy. Here, after this, despite what Ta'if and the Banu Thaqif did, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is mentioned in authentic hadith actually, sent the angel of the mountains. Some say it was Jibreel, there's no evidence it was Jibreel. Some say it was Jibreel and the angel of the mountain. We have no evidence of that. What's authentic in hadith, it was the angel of the mountain came and said, Ya Rasulullah, a messenger of Allah, just give the word. And I will crush Ta'if between the mountains, destroy them. The Prophet ﷺ said, no. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Leave them. No, I don't want that. Maybe from their future generations will come those who declare La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It didn't take long, It was not just from their future generations. Even those who were living there came about 10 years later, maybe less than 10 years later, the Banu Thaqif came to Medina and embraced Islam. This is his dua. This is his dua when he's saying that as well, making dua. Prophet ﷺ, they said to him, Ya Rasulullah, this was when battles were happening and wars later, and the mushrikun were attacking his enemies. They said, the Sahaba said, it was said to him, Ya Rasulullah, make dua against, Udu'u, Ya Rasulullah, ala al-mushrikeen. Meaning make dua against them for their destruction. The Prophet ﷺ said in authentic hadith, he says, إنما أو لست مبعوثا لعانا إنما بعثت رحمة صلى الله عليه وسلم. أو كما قال. He said, I have not been sent and raised as a curser of people, but I have only been sent as a mercy. Subhanallah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. People quote from weak reports from Sirah. Actually, if you want to look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, And really, that's what it's really about. So if I want to bring some picture to you, that's the picture I want to bring to you. Prophet ﷺ mentioned authentic hadith, Aisha radiallahu anha, others mentioned the Prophet ﷺ never hit anyone, human being, nay, he never even hit an animal. Never struck or slapped anyone. Not a slave, not a family member, not a child, not even an animal. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And yes, in Sirah it mentions in Ghazwatul Uhud that he killed a mushrik, but it's not authentic. What we have authentic, yes, he didn't harm anybody. He didn't harm anybody, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam never took revenge on anybody for himself. When he fought to defend the rights of others, and he was defending a city and a nation. That's when he fought, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. 2 times in hadith, he mentions strong words against disbelievers. One, in Makkah, when they were persecuting and meting out all kinds of rubbish and throwing rubbish on him. Ubay ibn Khalf came and took some rotten bones of an animal and blew it in his face, and he's saying, we're going to be raised up from this? Yeah. Others strangling him, throwing offal on him, throwing stones at him, etc. And then mocking him and laughing at him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أَجْرَمُوا كَانُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. Those who were criminals, they used to laugh at the believers. يَضْحَكُونَ وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِهِمْ يَتَغَامَزُونَ. And when they used to pass by the believers, they used to wink at each other while they were mocking. Surah mentions it in Mutaffifin. That's what it's describing. So despite all that, when they were really bad with Rasul, really hurt him, he said, Ya Ma'shar al-Quraysh, O gathering of Quraysh, which was including the worst kind, I've mentioned to you earlier, their names. He said, by him in whose hands is my soul, I bring you slaughter. That's what's waiting for you. Don't you realize? Slaughter. Zabah. That's what I bring. If you carry on like this, that's what's going to happen. That's the strongest words he said. At one time before Badr, reporting authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ made dua against the disbelieving enemy who were coming out to attack them. Asking Allah, cursing them to destroy them, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down in the Quran, لَيْسَ كَمِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٍ أَوْ يُتُوبَ عَلَيْهِمْ أَوْ يُؤَذِّبَهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ يَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُؤَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Subhanallah. When the Prophet was making this, Allah SWT said, revealing Quran to him, saying, لَيْسَ كَمِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٍ. This is nothing to do with you, what we do to these. You, meaning you carry on with what you're supposed to be doing. Prophet ﷺ being warned, لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٍ. If we forgive them, or if we punish them, for surely they are wrongdoers. And to Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and the earth. He forgives whom He wills, and He punishes whom He wills. Because Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. And the Prophet ﷺ changed his dua. Changed his dua to away from cursing, away from laughter, etc., and the destruction. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Taif, I'll be finishing now, get to the hijrah, we'll finish. Taif was a negative. Prophet ﷺ was really upset and really saddened how he'd been treated. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. On his way back, he knew what was waiting in Mecca, because they were going to be looked to kill him, because he's no protection. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. On the way, Nakhla, of course, the Prophet ﷺ informed with the Quran that jinn came to pray behind him and listen to the Quran, etc. You see at the beginning of Surah Jinn, قُلْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ أَنَّهُ اسْتَمَعَ نَفَرٌ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. Then the Prophet ﷺ stayed in the cave of Hira, and sent a message. And Mut'im ibn Adi, who was involved in the ending of the siege, this believer still came out armed with his family militarily to give protection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam return to Mecca. So he was given protection by a disbeliever so that the others couldn't touch him. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, now in the 10th year, 11th year especially of Nubuwwah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the Hajj of theirs, corrupted Hajj, started visiting the tribes. And he met the first of those Ansar, who became known as Ansar, of Aus and Khazraj, and took from the first 11, 12, a handful of them, the first pledge of Al-Aqabah, the Treaty of Al-Aqabah, because that's where they met secretly. And that pledge, those people embraced Islam. Yeah, 6 of them actually initially came to embrace Islam in the 10th year, 6 of them embraced Islam. There was no pledge taken then. The following year, in the 11th year, at the Hajj time, they came back with 70 something from the Aus and Khazraj from Medina, ready to embrace Islam. Now Prophet ﷺ took the first pledge of Al-Aqabah, often known as the pledge of Nisa, of women. Never really worked out why they called it that, because the women came in the following year actually. It wasn't to do with that. And the Prophet ﷺ took that pledge, that was to do following Islam, etc. And he sent with this group Musab ibn Umayr, radiallahu anhu, as the teacher. He was known as a teacher in Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ chose very wisely, of course, because the following year, when they came for the second pledge with a large group, at that stage, Musab ibn Umayr came back, and just the year before, some months before the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a believer in nearly every house in Medina. This is da'wah. So I'll end there just by saying that there are people who are ignorant of that idea, think that Medina was taken over by the Prophet ﷺ with a coup, and he marched in with soldiers and defeated, and by force did a coup d'etat. So they try and justify the jihadis and the others now of our times that we need to do a coup d'etat and take over and establish by force the Sharia. Actually, belief was widespread already. There were recipients waiting for Rasulullah ﷺ because there were believers in every household. So I say in da'wah, when you have a believer in every household in this country will take Islam for itself. You won't need to force it down with a plunger. We have a long way to go, have we not? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to be ambassadors of this wonderful deen and to follow the footsteps of the final messenger, who is the light of all lights, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who we love from the depths of our hearts. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us all on the mustaqim. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Sorry.